Howdy, people. Welcome in here on a Monday Traded Black podcast. I'm your host, Shad Dales. Hope you all survived the markets here today. Yes, could be some as they term. Some are calling it Black Monday. I wouldn't go that far just yet, but yeah, some uncertain times to say the least, what's going on in the macro level. But like we do here every single Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, give you all the latest news in the cannabis industry and really where cannabis sits in all this narrative. So we've got Beena Goldenberg, CEO of Organigram, coming up, as well Michael Bronstein for our weekly Insider's Edge segment to talk about the latest news involving in Texas. But speaking of Organigram, they did have some interesting acquisition announcements last week. We're going to dive into that and find out what this means for the company, as it's the next company to step into the THC beverage arena, and more companies doing that. So let's welcome in AV here on a Monday. Good to see you. And how you doing here today?
It's fine. It's fine. I mean, the market opened down 1,700 points last night, wound up ending the day down 280. There were some fake news headlines about 90-day pauses in the tariffs that CNBC, Reuters, and a bunch of news outlets ran, called the White House, and then wound up being fake news.
Yeah.
It is what it is. There's going to be a bunch of volatility. It's going to be a period of uncertainty. Hopefully things get worked out.
Dow Jones was down 350 points, so nothing crazy, 0.91%. What did the NASDAQ do today? Do you know?
NASDAQ is up on the day. It finished the day up 57 points.
Okay. All right. So all is well, but I think we're just getting started. But proceed with caution right now in these given times. But you know who's not proceeding caution, as they're going full on into an acquisition mode. But great to see as we welcome back Beena Goldenberg, CEO of Organigram. Good to see you. How are things?
Good to see you guys.
How's it going?
Yeah, it's always good to see you. And I know a lot of our viewers love the story and love to hear from you all the time. But great to have you back on. And we want to touch on this acquisition that you announced last week. So you've acquired a company called Collective Project, and it signals basically you've entered into the THC beverage arena, the latest cannabis company to do so. And why not, considering how much growth that we're seeing? So a little bit about the company. They're based out of Hamilton, Ontario, correct? Which is 45 minutes outside of Toronto, specialized in infused juices, teas, and sodas. But most importantly, they have an established footprint in the U.S. So outside of the announcement itself in the U.S. angle, what does this deal and acquisition mean for your shareholders?
So first of all, it gets us into what I think is going to be a really interesting category in the beverage category. And for the longest time here in Canada, the category was small. It was, stuck behind the dispensary, like in the dispensaries. It's not where consumers are shopping.
Exactly.
What became really exciting is a couple of things. Number one, the hemp Delta 9 space in the U.S. just showed us the potential. Product gets outside of the cannabis dispensary, and all of a sudden it's in the Total Wines, the top 10 liquors. It's sitting next to craft beer, and the numbers are showing that it's selling better than craft beer, and that they're bringing in new consumers to the categories. So very interesting space in the U.S. First time for us to have revenue in the U.S. that we can consolidate, because it's not plant touching in the hemp Delta 9 space, based on the Farm Bill. So pretty exciting there. But even in Canada, it's exciting because there is now noise about regulatory change. You've seen some provinces say, well, we'll allow product to be sold at events. There's some of the boards that are saying they're going to start considering where does on-premise fit into the mix. Now, I'm not saying that's happening right away, but we're hearing noise, which means movement is afoot, and we just wanted to get in. It's early days still, but very excited about being in the category.
You'd announced the Motif acquisition, which was in Vape, a couple of months back. Now you announced this acquisition that's in Beverage. Does this round out the portfolio, or are there any other form factors that you're looking to add to be complementary to the current product mix?
Yes, we're actually in all the major categories right now. Vapes was a big gap, and the Motif acquisition helped us on vapes and improved our infused pre-roll position. Listen, we're number one in vapes now, number one in pre-rolls, number one in hash, number one in milled flower, number 3 in gummies and whole flower. So we're a leading player. This beverage, it's still a small category, but we're very excited because we have great tasting products. And early days, products didn't taste that great, cannabis beverages. But one of the reasons we purchased the Collective Project right? We've heard in Canada, those people who know the Collective Arts brand, that was the craft beer brand. That's the Hamilton-based company that developed the products, but they can't produce because they're not a licensed producer. So they've sent their formulas to a co-man who's a licensed producer who's making these products. So this is an asset-light purchase for us, right? It's being co-manned at different companies that are making the products, but we will be selling the product into the stores and leveraging our sales team to get better distribution in Canada. And then through that asset-light model in the US, we're going to be using relationships that Collective Arts had as a beer brand to get distributors into the different stores, into different liquor stores, into the different retailers. So we're leveraging their strength that they brought in, and we're playing the cannabis angle.
And is there anything else that's complementary within your business currently from an IP perspective that you can see being integrated into the beverage lines to enhance the consumer experience?
Yes, no, absolutely. So as I'm sure we've mentioned before, so we developed the fast Nano Emulsion technology that helps on ingestibles. We launched gummies here in the Canadian marketplace, where we have a clinical study that says onset's 50% faster, and you get bioavailability, you get twice as high from taking that product than a normal gummy. Similar, we could use that same fast nano emulsion technology in beverages to get faster onset, more predictable impact, those kind of things. So we're very excited about formulating our own beverages and bringing them into the space. Yeah. So we're going to start with the collective project offerings, and we're going to take our technology and really differentiate.
How soon, I guess, do you see, the overall, this acquisition as far as your overall financial performance? Like, what benchmarks should, investors be looking for?
Yeah, so if they read the press release, look, we have an earnout structure because it's early days on this business, and we look at the next 18 months where we really see the change is going to happen on the beverage category. And so, a very small business today, pretty high expectations on what we think it could do for us based on the earnout. We're looking at, capping this business roughly at a $30 million business if all earnouts are paid. And that's a 2.5 times revenue multiple. So just to give you that perspective of what we think we could do in the next 18 months.
That's great.
You have BAT as one of your strategic partners and the Jupiter vehicle that you can use to invest in the U.S. Any insight as to how they're looking at the beverage opportunity in the U.S., if any? And could you see yourself potentially picking up other brands and, let's say, building a portfolio of beverages if that category does really start to take off and scale?
Yeah, no, certainly. Like, listen, it's an interesting category, and certainly the Jupiter Fund was meant to focus on international markets with a focus on the U.S. It's difficult to get into the U.S. when you're publicly traded into the cannabis space. So this is a really nice sweet spot in the hemp delta 9 where we could get in. What you might have read in the press release is that the earnout payments on the U.S. business growth could be subject to being paid through the Jupiter Fund, because that's building the U.S. business. And, I wouldn't say that we wouldn't be looking at other opportunities like that in the U.S.
We were actually in Washington a couple of weeks ago, Anthony and I, and wow, we got a front row seat on just the overall growth of the European market. But clearly that is seeing a full court press on just the overall growth. But we got a chance actually to meet, why am I drawing a blank right now? The CEO of Sanity Group. Finn. Phenomenal, very smart person. But clearly one thing that Anthony and I learned is that whatever goes on in the U.S. doesn't really matter. They're going full steam ahead. And what's really good to see is the support that they're getting from different government officials in specific countries, but really got a great idea as to why you've made some of these investments in Germany. But you want to talk just about, again, I know we've had you on a few times. We've talked about this in the past, but I just wanted to highlight some of the stuff that we did learn and the overwhelming amount of support that really the European EU market is getting, because it wasn't just out of Germany. There was people, I don't know how many countries were there, Anthony, from Italy, there was from the UK. It was quite 750 million people too, but you're seeing growth there, which is great to see.
Absolutely. And listen, this touches on why we rebranded our company and announced our change from Organigram Inc. to Organigram Global. Pretty excited about the opportunity. Look, we are the leader in the Canadian marketplace, but we have grown and we continue to grow internationally. We have a great relationship with the Sanity Group in Germany. Since a year ago, when they decriminalized marijuana and allowed people through the medical channels, like this business has grown fourfold, right? It's tremendous, the growth that they've had there. And it's still just beginning. And I use this stat all the time, and I'm sure Finn has used it also, which is currently you only have about 0.5% of the population that is registered as what we call cannabis patients. And yet in more mature markets like Australia and Israel, where they've had medical cannabis available, they're sitting in the 2 to 3%. If they're 0.5%, there's still a long way to go just in the medical market alone. And yet Finn will talk about the fact that he has applied to 6 pilot projects for recreational cannabis. And you've seen recently the results coming out of Switzerland with their pilot projects, and it's all going very well and very exciting. So I think the upside potential in Germany is great. It's, you know, and we're focused there. We're going to leverage our expertise from the Canadian marketplace and take it global. Really, that's the reason for our relaunch, to tell the world that we're not the same company as we used to be. We're bigger and we're growing. Yeah,
well, I'm not going to argue that, because I was just going to ask my next question. You're now in the THC beverage market. You have obviously aspirations for the US market. You talk about the Canadian market, what opportunities those present, because as we've heard recently too, that there's actually a supply issue that's going on in Canada right now. And you've also got, I guess, your eyes set on the European market as well. How would you best describe, I guess, where your main focal points are as a company moving forward? Because there's a lot of moving parts here.
Yeah, absolutely. Listen, I think we've got a strong foundation in Canada, but our goal is to leverage that strength and take it global. Yeah. And really, we're looking at, you know, from the US market, it's all about the beverage category, and we're pretty bullish on that. And as we look internationally, we think Germany is really the next market to pop. Yes, we do a lot of export product into Australia. We sell into the UK. And I think people know our product globally, and product coming out of Canada is great quality. We have great relationships with our customers. So global is a big opportunity for us to continue to grow, but we can't turn our backs on what made us where we are now. So Canada, maintaining our Canadian footprint, our leadership position, you know, we're the #1 leader in the Canadian marketplace by market share. We need to keep that. We keep innovating, keep making sure we bring quality products, keep investing behind our brands the best we can in the retail spaces where we could reach them with our Shred brand, really $230 million retail brand, our Box Hot brand, which is $150 million retail brand. So we have a couple of very strong brands, and then take it globally, like taking that to other markets, and we're pretty excited about that opportunity.
As it relates to the beverage opportunity in Canada, do you ever see potentially there come a day where it's as accessible as it is in the United States right now as it relates to the D9 drinks? Because when we look at the United States, obviously it's federally illegal. Canada, it's federally legal. Meanwhile, we have arguably more accessibility with those drinks here than you do up there.
Absolutely. But you know what? Everybody's watching what's happening on the hemp Delta-9 space. And we have been in meetings with 2 of the provincial boards talking about how to increase the accessibility specifically on beverages, and how they're excited about testing things and rolling new initiatives out. So I think we're on the cusp. No regulations have changed just yet, but we're on the cusp of those changes. And, you know, you had to get in to play. So we're pretty excited about our opportunity.
Well, I know Premier Ford, and one thing that man likes is he likes his beverages. So I could see definitely some changes taking place there in Ontario. But, you know, let's face it, back when Kathleen Wynne was the Premier of Ontario, the government wanted control. And I know in the early stages when Doug Ford was elected as Premier of Ontario, there wasn't a lot of dispensary locations. But now you see beer, wine being sold in a lot of grocery stores. You're seeing that start to expand more and more. So I would more or less think it's only a matter of time, to Anthony's point, where you start to see expansion similar to what you're seeing in the US, where people aren't buying these beverages in dispensaries. It's in Total Wines, but you probably will see the same thing in major grocery chain lines, don't you think?
I hope so. I mean, I do think there's a real question why it shouldn't be. in any age-gated opportunity. Like, it's age-gated, allow people to buy, at a bar. Why should they only have access to liquor, alcohol, beer, but not cannabis beverages? Like, I think it has to happen. It's just a matter of time.
Yeah. Well, this has been great. Before I let you go, you got a big day coming up later this week. There's an investor day coming up online. That's being hosted on Thursday, if I'm correct. So if anyone's interested, how do they find out information? Where do they log on to?
Yes, they log on to organigram.ca to learn more about it. But we're really excited to invite everyone who's now listening to our inaugural OG investor session that we're having on Thursday. We'll tell you a little bit more about our journey, about where we're going, what we're focused on, and we're really excited to share that story.
That's great. Who's going to be on it? There's going to be you. Anybody else?
Yes, my CFO, my head of R&D, innovations, because that's a big focus of ours, and our head of investor relations will set it all up for us.
Yeah. I know you guys have been head down the last couple of weeks. So listen, great job. Great acquisition, it sounds like, with the U.S. footprint. But I think the idea here is Beverage is front and center in the U.S., vaping in Canada, and then obviously the partnership with the Sanity Group. They have access, I think it was, Finn was telling me, to over 5,000 different physicians in Germany alone. So that's very compelling. I understand what's going on there. One last thing, and I know somebody reached out to us. Could you have Beena explain to us how it's all structured and set up with BAT? How does that all work between BAT, Sanity Group, and Organigram?
Okay, it's very simple. BAT is an investor of Organigram.
Yep.
They put in money. They're an investor in Sanity Group. But Organigram is also an investor in Sanity Group. And with Jupiter, the fund that we've talked about, BAT, in their investment into Organigram, the last one we announced, and I think we were on here to talk about that $124.6 million investment, 2/3 of it was set aside for international growth. It's something that BAT funded through their investment, but Organigram manages it. So we decide where to put the money into, and we can leverage whatever support. Look, we work closely with BAT.
Yep.
They're an investor. They don't direct us. They don't control us. They're an investor, and we're doing things like growing global and getting into beverages. So that's how it all works.
But 2/3 of it dedicated towards the European market. That tells you something, right?
The international market, and we're adding the U.S. and international right now.
Correction.
But for sure, like our biggest investment so far from Jupiter was in Sanity Group. So we see Germany a very interesting market as we do the beverage market.
Do you think the beverage market will eventually be the biggest out of the cannabis industry in due time?
I think so.
Yeah.
I think, Constellation wasn't wrong when they first got in, but I think it was just too early. And the product quality just wasn't there in the early days. And product, 6 years later, the product quality is way better. There's, Nano Emulsion technologies, not just ours, but others that have come up that have helped the product quality. And getting outside of the retail dispensary is like a game changing.
Yeah, that's the biggest. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, I think she makes a good point, Anthony, just about how Canopy, yes, it was a great idea to get in, might have got in a little bit early, but that gives a good measuring stick as to how much, because, you talk about it all the time, just about these beverages and how much it's just expanded so much, especially in your home state of Florida. But gives you an idea as to how much it's changed from when Constellation first came into the, the arena when this all started to unfold.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyways, Beena, best of luck. Okay. Investor Day starts Thursday, organigram.ca, and it starts at what time?
You know what? I don't even know. You'll have to go online to find out. I know I'm there the whole day, so
we will put it in the comment section and check with some of your team afterwards to make sure everybody's up to speed on it. But good to know. This Thursday, organigram.ca, investor day going on with yourself, CFO, and head of investor relations. Should be a great one. But in the meantime, appreciate you always check.
It starts at 4 p.m. Eastern.
4 p.m. Yes. Okay. Got a little ear, your producer in the back of you and your set right now. But I appreciate you logging on here today. Let's keep in touch. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right.
Thanks, Beena.
Thanks, Beena. That was great. One of the nicest people you'll meet in the industry. That's for sure.
I wish we could pull the podcast from the early days when we started this, when I said that beverage was going to be the biggest thing in cannabis.
I remember some of those.
And then all the comments lit up saying, no, you're wrong. You're crazy.
Do you remember those early days? We'd be like talking, all of a sudden, you know what? We need to do a podcast. Let's get on in an hour. Never had.
By the way,
any set times.
Trump says that we are fully on track for eliminating the capital gains tax. I don't know if that's a joke because no one's going to have capital gains this year after the last couple of days, but it should be quite interesting.
Yeah. She
He's
should mark her
liberated
name.
us.
Hey, let's roll a Beena. Yeah, maybe. Not bad, Chris. John Hamm, good to see you. Thank you again for the great information. Any other interesting information? Thoughts on high tide MSOs? Oh, by the way, April 22nd, that is the date that we are going to be interviewing Luke Mongeau. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that last name correctly, but April 22nd, it's actually a pre-record, so we'll probably post that on Thursday, April the 24th, but thought I'd give everybody the quick heads up that we are indeed confirmed, and Luke from Canopy will be coming back on. That concludes our first segment here today. It's now time for our weekly Insider's Edge here on a Monday at Trade to Black. Welcome back in your Insider's Edge here on a Monday. Let's welcome in our favorite guest of the week, as always, Mr. Michael Bronstein. Good to see you. I think he's freshly shaved. You got a haircut too. You look sharp, man.
Look, I shaved. I got a haircut over the weekend. I had to do it.
How are you? How are you?
Yeah, things are good. Hopefully, we're trading a black today as opposed to trading a red, which I did. Yeah. Which I did too much of last week.
What do you make of this so far right now? What's going on? I know we're here to talk about cannabis and stuff that's going on the state level, but how does that, I guess, some of the conversations, people want to understand better an idea like what you're doing, but how does things affect, I guess, on the macro level as to what you guys are doing and hearing on a daily basis that pertains to the industry?
I think a lot.
Yeah.
And I followed a lot. I mean, I got on the phone with my team this morning and I said, look, you can't look at kind of the overall impact and not think about what this might mean for the industry. And
right.
That we're going to have to watch this. We're going to have to, watch the evolving situation very closely because remember, there are all types of unintended consequences. When we had COVID, one of the things that happened was the industry actually wound up doing pretty well during that period because a lot of the stimulus money that came out was stimulating what was going on in the industry. Same time, we had trouble importing certain packaging, right? There were certain troubles in the supply chain that the industry wasn't immune to. And then there are questions like during an economic downturn, there are a lot of times where folks are like, well, how is marijuana going to do in those times, right? We think like, well, alcohol traditionally does usually does.
Well, I do want to say something. It did help that it was deemed as an essential business during that time during COVID. That was huge, right?
So it's interesting. We were involved in getting the businesses deemed essential. And the first state to come out and say that it was essential was Pennsylvania.
Really?
And all the other groups, yeah. So Tom Wolf, the governor.
You were part of that.
Yeah, because the thing is like medical cannabis.
It's medicine.
It's medicine, right? Mm-hmm. So the argument that we had at the time, which was right, was if you're going to keep pharmacies open, which you have to, you got to keep dispensaries open. These are medical operations. And under the classifications under state law, that's what they should be. And other states followed, other states followed suit pretty soon thereafter. I mean, so it was terrific leadership by then Governor Wolf on this. But I remember those conversations because we didn't know what was going to happen.
Right.
And the people who are building out facilities, right? So it's like, all right, we're looking at building facilities or people are looking at expansion, like tariffs impact how those things happen. And during COVID, we had supply chain issues with getting those materials like everybody else and building those things and building, dispensaries, growing facilities, things like that. I mean, it was a real issue.
Learn something new from you every single week.
The biggest way that the cannabis industry is going to be impacted by the tariffs is on the vape side. All that hardware, all those batteries, 99% of it's imported from China. I know that Jupiter builds vapes in the United States and designs vapes. That's part of Tilt Holdings, but I'd be willing to bet all of their components are manufactured for the most part in China. as far as that goes.
So to Anthony's point, because you just said, Michael, like, what are some of the ramifications and concerns that the industry has on the macro level right now? What comes to mind, one or two things that we should be aware of?
I think one is obviously there's a sensitivity to what capital constraints are, right? And that's been ongoing. That's been ongoing in the industry, and a lot of things have dried up, but like more sort of that capital is still quite an issue, and in a down market, like really focusing on fundamentals in the business, because here's the thing, like folks are selling product. You look at you look at what they're doing in sales, and sales are happening, and things are going on, right? A lot of there's concern also about about debt also that's upcoming. So I think that a lot of those things really actually do impact the larger, like how we think about the industry in general, right? Because of all these things that aren't normal about our industry, okay, like the tax situation and the federal illegality of it and the state by state nature of it, right? We spend a lot of time talking banking. We spend a lot of time talking about those issues, when really also, like, the cannabis industry, whether the government likes it or not, is part of a larger economy, and we're not hiding. People can close their eyes, but we're not hidden. Right, we actually are impacted by some of those things, as well. So we're watching them very closely, and seeing if the market is the market is feeling and any strain that we see going on.
Yeah. Before we get into
go ahead, Chad.
I was going to say, before we get into the whole Texas angle and what's the latest going on between the SB3, and I wanted to bring up the news that came out late last week. I know it's on the federal level, and I know you focus a lot on the state level stuff right now, but your thoughts on cannabis and rescheduling not being one of the 6 priorities when it came to drug policy. I do know that they did say could evolve, and I do know that Donald Trump and his administration, as we've said in previous live streams, wants full narrative, which makes me believe this is going to come right out of left field. But I'm not surprised that this was announced. They have got some major things on their plate right now, and it only makes sense to get the prevention programs, the treatment centers, the fight against opioids and fentanyl. That all makes sense. But I think the key thing here is that we shouldn't fixate so much at not being part of the list, because it was clearly outlined that this could evolve. So your thoughts?
To me, I looked at the list and I didn't really think that much of it, because it was from the Office of National Drug Control policy. I believe that's where the list was. And like, it's like, you're not making legalization policy through like that office, right? Like, you're actually talking about, and the things that they're focused on illicit, right? On illicit drugs, and like marijuana right now to this administration falls somewhere in between, right? Like, even the person who was just appointed in that position is saying, oh, there's state legal markets. So it would be a very big surprise to me if they had said, well, actually, one of the priorities here from National Drug Control is like, all right, is legalization, right? Like, that would be, I think we're a number of years away before we see somebody who's in that office. Like, even when legalization happens, it's unclear to me that if there would be somebody in that office that would be like a friendly, right, relative to where that is. Like, that's just sort of the nature of that office. So to me, I don't really think that took it off. I think that this is purely in a political process. And the decision that's going to get made on this is well above where that list came from, in my view.
Yeah.
Gretchen, do you think the ONDCP matters? Doesn't matter, according to her.
At all. Not on this. She's right.
Yeah. Good point. I know you guys want to dive into some of the topics pertaining to Texas, and I know there is some news that you found interesting here today, Anthony, of what's going on, but you want to maybe elaborate off of that and what's you found interesting?
Yeah, I thought it was an interesting hearing. Quite elaborate compared to what we had seen in Florida, I think last month when they had a hearing in Tallahassee. And I know that there's some hemp legislation in the works in Florida, but it was comprehensive. I mean, they had industry participants, lobbyists, the most sophisticated people that were up there looked like they were lobbyists and proponents for the alcohol industry that were lobbying on behalf of beverages, getting a carve out and getting included in the mix. A lot of arguments there. There was a big argument from the chair about, well, if we do outlaw hemp in the state of Texas, what's then stopping people from going online and buying hemp products that are still going to find their way into the state of Texas? A lot of the hemp companies out there, the good actors, they don't geofence where they're shipping to, but they'll tell you on their website, we don't ship to X, Y, and Z. I think Cantrip's website, they say they'll ship to 34 states, and then they list the ones that they won't. So that doesn't become a problem. I didn't realize until today that you can actually buy THC drinks on Amazon, Delta 9 hemp beverages, because that's what they kept saying. They're like, oh, if you go and buy them on Amazon, if I'm going to go purchase them on Amazon, and you actually can, and they'll ship them straight to your door. But it was same old stuff. You had the shop owners that also were Kratom dispensary owners that were calling out the police chief for being a straight up liar. I thought the police chief, who was one of the first gentlemen to testify, actually thoroughly understood the synthetic argument to a very, very good degree as to what is going on and what needs to be stopped. It was good. It was a good conversation. I'm curious to see what happens. Granted, everything that I'm saying right now is in regards to HB 28, not SB 3. That's going through that's going to, I think, come tomorrow under a lot of not scrutiny, but conversation. But it was fun to watch. It was just long. I was just going in and out of it for 30-minute segments during the day.
Did you get a chance, Michael, to see any of it? And
I mean, it was 7 hours.
Yeah.
You know, so
I'm not asking for a full essay on
the abridged version of it, but no, I mean, it was important, and the arguments that we're seeing play out in Texas, we're seeing across the country in a number of different states, and this bill in particular, when looking at so-called beverage carve out, like you were talking about beverage before. It's interesting because like I came into the advocacy world too, like really first. There were folks that were involved in the beverage space about 10 years ago. We've talked about this a lot. So the beverage category, I spent a lot of time on, attached as a beverage council, right? And it's something that we've looked at for years on this. And I think that what you need to see here, right? There's clearly, and Texas, I think, is kind of like a fork in the road, right? If Texas says, you know what, we're cool with beverages, but we're not cool with anything else, I think you could see states kind of move. Some states that are like quote unquote red states move in that direction. And there's like a natural, there's sort of a natural separation between, I think, folks who are in the beverage industry versus folks who are like selling, THCA flower and, or synthetics even for that matter, right? Like it's different. And I think that what you're going to see is there's like a larger political force around like beverage alcohol. Clearly, we all know that, right?
A certain demographic has the back of the beverage industry, and it's because the families and the generational wealth that owns those distributors and those liquor stores that see the dollar signs.
Yeah.
That's more powerful than anybody that we have on our side for the traditional state-run cannabis industry.
What are
That's
some
what
of
beverage?
I'll throw this in. It's actually interesting to me as an aside. This is interesting. To me, it's interesting. So you've got families in there who own a lot of those businesses, right?
Yeah.
And you start thinking about like what the cannabis industry looks like in general, right? And the distribution business on the alcohol side is basically, it's like moated a little bit, right?
Yeah.
And there were folks who are arguing about that about the cannabis industry. The question is, when you move to federal legalization, what do the companies look like really at that point, right? Because at federal legalization in the alcohol space, we've seen the division of where that is, right? We saw the tiered system. Okay, when you layer that on top of how we could see federal legalization, I think it paints an interesting picture about what businesses might look like over the period of the coming years and what the market might look like. Because in Texas, like say we get a bill in Texas and the thing that they do pass, and we don't know yet, right? We know that a beverage bill could pass. We also know that the lieutenant governor has said, I don't want any of this. You can't regulate any of this, right? We saw that press conference. We saw where they were on it. Okay. And beverage seemingly would be, from a regulatory perspective, one of the easier things.
Yeah.
And from an operator perspective, we've seen a lot of folks jump into the beverage space, right? Like even, Organigram, you were just talking about, you were just talking to on that. Okay. And so, like, to me, that's interesting. And so long as it kind of stays to the beverage conversation, because I think the beverage conversation is the thing that could very well be separated out as a conversation on a state regulatory perspective, but it remains to be seen, right? Like, because there's still too much cross-pollination between synthetics, like the companies, right, of the synthetic THC market and the alliances that they've tried to build with people who are, selling in the beverage category. And ultimately, I just don't think that's
the gray area, right?
No, it needs to be.
I don't think it's going to work long term.
It needs to be siloed considerably. And one of the other interesting data points, now that you mentioned it, was there was a CBD store owner that was also selling Delta 8. All of her products were they weren't all naturally derived. The only synthetic one was D8. And then she refused to sell THCA flower, HHC, THCP, Delta 10, all the exotic synthetics. In her testimony, she goes, I was in business, but the liquor store next door to me that started carrying all of the synthetics and all of the exotic products put me out of business.
Crazy.
And then the chairman that was up there goes, excuse me, what do you mean the liquor store put you out of business? She goes, they carry more things than we carry, and they're carrying exotic products. Then it actually got into a conversation to where another politician brought up the point. So you're telling me too that Texans right now are ordering cannabis flower on the internet from California, Colorado, Washington, any other jurisdiction, and they're getting it via the mail, paying with a credit card, and it's completely fine. That was like the aha moment for the panel, because even if they did know, they acted like they had no idea. But this conversation that they had today in the state of Texas was the national conversation that we need to have related to the hemp industry, because it was all of the pain points put out there, good actors that were actually speaking about the pain points in the industry, and it was shining a flashlight on all of the nonsense. And everybody that was up there too, that were industry participants, were like, we want to be regulated. Like, please regulate us. We're asking for it. Also, get all the synthetics and all this shit out of the market so we can just conduct clean business. And it was great to see.
I mean, natural THC, like that's what we're trying to legalize here.
Yeah.
Okay. And there are a lot of folks, like, you see the advocacy. They talk about like Delta 8. And I think that in industry, like, you could sort of see where advocacy, like where the battle lines are drawn in advocacy, right? Because like some folks will be like, well, Delta 8, it occurs naturally, but you can't really actually make enough Delta 8 in commercial quantities really to do that. So like, and then when you talk about regulation, people are like, we want to be regulated. But then you actually really drill down into it, and really what they mean is like no regulation, right? And that's a problem, right? There has to actually be regulation. And it's not just age, age limits are good. We need that, right? But what good is it selling someone like a fully synthetic product with an age limit? Like, that to me makes no sense. Like, let them buy natural THC with an age limit.
Right.
But some of the other stuff, because that's where the demand, like, that's really what the itch that people are trying to scratch as consumers in a lot of cases. So that's really where we have to get.
Yeah.
Well, maybe we need to go back 100 years and look at podcasts that were being done then. Do you think there was podcasts about the early days of alcohol? But what can we learn from all this situation? But love thy neighbor. I cannot imagine, based on that example, Anthony, that you just said, between the liquor store and that not dispensary, but the store that she basically had selling natural derived products, how that went down. But that's a great example as to where things sit right now. It needs to be echoed onto a national stage for sure. But
yeah, they were talking too about the density of the stores. Everyone acknowledged 8,000 stores in Texas is obscene.
Yeah,
there was a veteran on there that was saying that in the Teacup program, which is their medical program within the state of Texas, he has to drive an hour and a half to get his prescription. That's crazy. They're just completely lacking accessibility within their standardized program in the state of Texas. Meanwhile, all of these smoke shops are proliferating. And I think someone said that in the densest area, there's like 24 stores in a 20 square mile town. That's absurd.
That goes to show how many people are buying. Holy cow.
Yeah, there's so much. Yeah, it's unbelievable. I mean, it's unbelievable. And the medical aspect of it, right? Because there were a lot of folks that were up saying like, hey, you know, we're patients and we have issues with that, right? Like medical is really important to give access to here, right? It's really important. Nobody wants to take medicine away from folks, right? Folks need to know what's in that medicine. Okay. Correct. That's where we have to be. I think a lot of American consumers, and like, I'll tell you something, before I really did this, I just thought that if you could buy it in a store, it was probably like safe and someone was looking out after it. And now, like, I feel like it's more like, you know, those hot dogs on the roller at the gas station.
Ooh.
Right? Like, that's kind of what it feels like. Because you're like, where, right? Like, and we're having, like, you know, oversight hearings on FDA. Okay. And you're sort of like, who's watching out, right? You're like, I live in the United States. So I assume that if I see a product that's like on a shelf somewhere, that it's regulated, but it's not a lot of times.
Correct.
You ever had
one? And a lot of these products aren't even the strength that they're saying on the label. I was talking to somebody over the weekend. It's like a liquor store selling a bottle of vodka that's full of moonshine that they're selling you as a bottle of vodka. That's not going to be a good consumer experience. And there needs to be a certain level of standardization if we're talking about intoxicating products, whether it's alcohol or cannabis.
That hot dog example got a few people. As Pete V says, my gut just churned. You ever had one of those dogs? I don't think I have.
There's nothing wrong with like a dirty water hot dog. Like, I'm okay with that. It is. It's okay.
In New York, or like at a ball.
It tastes good, but they're probably.
But you're passing on the sushi at Chuck's Truck Stop, yes?
It depends on the Yelp rating. Really.
So look, if I'm reading the numbers correctly, we're looking at a $5.5 billion economy in the state of Texas, 40,000 jobs, if I'm correct. I know the Texas Hemp Business Council, I'm just reading this now, has been very vocal in urging lawmakers to reject these bills. Like, do you have any dialogue with some of these councils? Like, you know, and if so, what's I don't know if you can share what you had talk about. What's that like? Like, are they fully supporting the hemp industry, knowing what's going on behind the scenes? Where's that all set?
I'm not going to speak directly to that. I haven't talked directly to that group. What I can say in general, and talking to groups federally, which we do a lot of, and talk about like what folks are looking at on a state level and where they're at. A lot of times you approach them and you're like, well, you're selling a synthetic product, right? We can't, you know, this is sort of what you should be doing, right? And they're like, it's not synthetic, right? And then you're like, well, what about these products? And they're like, they're not synthetic. I'm like, I don't think that's the case, right? Like, I don't think that some folks aren't educated about it. Some folks know exactly what they're doing on some of it. And then there are other groups that are like, look, we just need a natural THC, right? That this is all sort of the same thing. Why aren't we regulated, right? And that's sort of what you want to hear, right? You want to hear that, okay? And that's good. And I'll tell you where else you want to hear. You want to hear like I look at some of the industrial applications of this. Like, I've been involved on the hemp side for like 10 years.
It's great.
When I talk about hemp, like, I'm not talking about the synthetic, right? Because I don't view that as the quote unquote hemp industry.
Correct.
No.
Right? Like, that's not, like, people call that hemp, but I think that it's a misnomer. We need to talk about those products differently. Okay, so that we can actually educate a consumer about what they are. Yeah, because not everybody knows what they are. And hemp is fantastic. It's really important. It could be a very important part of the economy. And it's really kind of the thing that actually concerns me a lot is that, like, we have hemp, which is a great plant, and there are a lot of things that we can do with it. And people are kind of hijacking the name to some extent in the advocacy, like the good name of hemp, right? And that gets lost a lot of times. I hear a lot of folks who've been involved in that side of the industry for a while, whether they're sort of in the, hemp seed or they're, fiber or grain, and it's just like they have a real problem with how that's being talked about and co-opted.
Huh. Do you think there's and I'm not a doctor, and maybe this is a dumb question, but Anthony, you and I were talking off to the side about some of these heavy metals that they're basically detecting in people with dementia later in life. But when you're smoking some of this stuff, like you say, the synthetic stuff, could that stuff that we've talked about not be in a person's body in due time? Like, if you continue to do that over and over? I know it's a very broad question.
Yeah, so I'm not a medical professional, and I mean, anecdotally, I'm kind of just going to regurgitate what Adam Terry said when we had him on the show. He's a chemical engineer, if I'm not mistaken, by trade. So I'll take his word for it on this subject matter. He was saying when in the synthesis process, when they're deriving a lot of these, we'll call them exotic synthetics, out of CBD being that base molecule, there are free radicals and there are heavy metals that are introduced in the synthesis process. They're then not being tested for after the product is made. So can there be heavy metals that are contaminated in some of this stuff? Yes. As to the concentration of them and the effects on the body of long-term use, I have absolutely no idea.
Yeah, I get it.
We're not going to know. I mean, like we
don't know. That's the thing.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. We have to be a little cautious about. I mean, I've asked on this program before. I'm like, would you let your friend use or a family member use those products? And I think that the answers are telling when you ask that question. Right? I mean, look, and there's definitely certain sources that are out there that are good, right? There definitely are. But I do think that there's way more bad than good right now. And if people can't sort that out themselves, that's when we have a problem, right? If the consumer's educated that they could be doing harm to themselves and they're okay with it, then that's a consumer choice, right? And we're all about consumer choice, right? The problem is if they don't have the information and they're being sold a product that they don't know what they don't know about it, that's the problem.
Man, if they made that publicized, though, if the information and used examples, that would spread so fast.
Look at the vitamin E acetate. Look at the vitamin E acetate VapeGate stuff that we had to handle.
I know.
And I mean, we get caught up on the testing part of this argument within the hemp industry, and I want people to just understand that we're not on some sanctimonious crusade, as if we're not aware enough that this does happen in the traditional state-run cannabis industry as well. From time to time, there are batches that have tested bad. There has been, I don't want to say crisis, but scandals in labs in California and Colorado.
Yeah.
It's something that has happened. It's just not even mandated within the hemp industry. And there's no way for these consumers to be knowing.
We have to be better in the cannabis industry about saying stuff about it too, right? It's that's what it's about. I mean, we have folks that know what's going on and we got to address it.
Yeah. Ed Blunt may have the comment of the day. Florida is worse than Texas, but here's the key why I say comment of the day. At least Texas is talking about it. That is a great start, right?
I think Florida's talked about
Florida's talking about it.
I think Florida's really talking about it too, because they had a hearing on it. There's a bill there's a bill that's up on it. And actually the conversation that we have in Florida is all right, on the Senate side, you basically have a natural THC bill that knocks out the synthetics, right? And then and look, there's a lot of minutia to this and I could go into that, but on the House side, you have basically more of a, kind of a synthetic more of sort of a synthetic marketplace type thing. And this conversation is at a head in Florida. Likely to be resolved.
There'll be resolution for this stuff in Florida relatively quickly.
I think so too.
Yeah. Listen, if we could get paid by the minute, we'd be millionaires, because I love talking to you all the time, my friend. Always good catching up every single Monday. Before I let you go, who you got tonight? College basketball. You got Florida, you got Houston.
Go Gators.
Yeah, I'm gonna go Florida.
All right. Gators it is.
I hate Florida, but
I was gonna say, you're a Seminole. You actually would cheer for Florida in that game?
I got a lot of friends that went to UF, so I think the Gators win. I'm not gonna pick the losing team to cut off my nose to spite my face.
This is recorded. I just have to call it the way it is.
All right.
I can say what I want. I just got to make the pick.
I heard a rumor yesterday morning.
My bracket's also got UF winning it all, so I have a little bit of a self-interest.
I have a friend that was with Wayne Gretzky over the weekend, and they texted me yesterday morning and said, "Dude, you're never going to know, never going to believe this." I go, "What?" And they said, Ovechkin is purposely not going to score today against the Islanders in New York. He's going to try scoring at home because this person was with Wayne Gretzky over the weekend, and Vladimir Putin is flying to Washington to be in attendance on Thursday night, and Trump's going to be there. And I went, no way. Oh, yeah. And they're all getting fingerprinted before they go. And I said, hold on a second. Ovechkin just scored, jackass. Like, he just scored. I'm like,
well, he foiled the plan, right? He foiled the plan. That's like the Sports Center commercial that he did. Remember that, where he was like, oh, like the spy commercial? Did you ever see that? That was hilarious.
Oh, real quick. Jay Mala writes, any news on Pennsylvania legalization? Any update?
Yeah, I think we're likely to see some movement by the end of this month in the House. So I think we are going to start seeing that conversation. The conversation is picking up right now, but I think we're going to start seeing the conversation pick up good at the end of the month. Well, and I'll give a shout out to El Guapo for the Sabay.
Kevin.
Sabay.
Go up. That's hilarious. All right, my friend. Well, always good checking in with you, and we'll see you next week. Okay.
We'll see you next week.
All right. Thank you, Michael.
All right. Bye.
Good stuff.
I just looked at my bracket. I just realized I actually had Houston and Florida in the championship.
Come on, you didn't even pay attention. That's what you picked.
No.
Thanks, Shad, Anthony, and Michael. Great info, like always. Top. Hopefully, we will celebrate tomorrow, Big Tuesday, on my books. What else we got here? I was going through a ton of, man, when you guys talk about that whole topic, man, it generates a ton of comments.
Texas? Yeah.
Yeah, but rightfully so, right? What was one? Raging Gun, you had a great one, too. One thing that people with money like to sleep. Isn't that the truth? But
I don't know about that.
No. Gretchen writes, love those dogs. Oh, God. I was churning there. That's not a good.
I don't eat hot dogs.
No. Okay. Wednesday, Trent Woloveck is actually coming on.
Yes. It's going to be an interesting episode.
Can you top line us what some of the topics will be discussed?
Hemp.
And what's he been doing pertaining to hemp over the last couple of weeks? Anything in particular?
We'll talk about it on the podcast.
All right. And to find out, you got to log on at 4. So be there. Doug Drysdale from Simon has just informed us he will not be on Wednesday. So we'll have to find a new guest for that. We'll keep you posted on who that might be. And then Friday, I know you're working on a few guests, so that'll be interesting. And we got a good one coming up on Wednesday with Trent, because I know he's always got some great intel, not only the juicy story, but what's going on in Washington. He's one of the original OGs of the industry and very well connected. So look forward to logging on with him and learning more about just the latest as to what he's hearing in Washington, and on the hemp side of things too, is what you just alluded to. In the meantime, if you want to know what the latest news and all this stuff developing in Texas and get an analysis from it all, make sure to scan this QR code right here, log in to our baked in newsletter that's delivered to your inbox weekdays, Monday through Friday at 8 a.m. Eastern time, as Mr. Varrell will give his take on why this is important for you to all to know the latest developments and what this could mean as far as the hemp industry in Texas, and really what kind of impact it'll have on other states here in the U.S. So make sure to log on and subscribe by scanning that QR code. Leave some comments as well. And Anthony, I hear your baby crying, so you better get to it. And thanks for checking in. And we'll see you back here Wednesday at 4.
Thanks, everybody.
Now, that was a good one. What'd you guys all think? Did you like what we had to say here today? Do you agree, disagree with what we're saying? Love to get your feedback. As usual, leave comments below. Trade to Black is growing, and we wouldn't have done it without you. So if you haven't done so, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can also check us out on Apple and Spotify for the audio version. And as usual, leave lots of comments. We, as I said, love to hear back from you. Thanks again, everybody, for watching.